Anybody like to garage sale? Anybody? One, my mom. Okay, anybody else? All right. Okay, a couple of you. I go through, okay, there we go. Yeah, garage sales. Yeah. I go through phases where I like to garage sale, and so I'll go through where I go hard and heavy, and I mean, I'm online looking for them, and I'm going to them, and I'm like Everybody ever make a map so you can get to it most efficiently? Yeah, I got problems, I know. So last year, I was going around the community to all the garage sales, and I had it in my GPS even, so that it would like just, like a UPS driver, it would take me to one and then the next one and the next one. So I ended up just south of Guthrie, like Liberty Lake area, and a really long dirt road. And I'm like, this may be it for me. I may not make it out of here, because you just kept going down this private dirt road, and then it finally just kind of ended, and there was like all these broken down lawnmowers and stuff, and I'm like, I don't know if this is going to be good or not. And I get out, and there's no one there, but there's like a garage sale going on, so I start shopping, obviously, and then someone comes out and greets me, this lady, and I buy weird stuff, so she had a whole collection of like Christian books that were pretty old, and I was looking at them. I was like going through them all, and like old DVDs and stuff, and I don't know why I needed any of that. I didn't, but it was really cheap, so I was looking at it, and then there was a really cool Bible, and I remember looking at that Bible, and it was really nice, one of these really nice leather-bound ones, and it looked brand new, and I said, how much is this? Because nothing had prices on it, hardly. And she said, it's $10. And she said, it was my late husband's. And we had this kind of like moment. I was like, oh, wow. And then she goes, but I don't think he ever read it. And I was like, okay, how about $3? And she's like, sure. So anyway, it went from this you thought it was going to be a really emotional moment, didn't you? You should have known better. But anyway, so I buy odd things. I bought a lot of books off of her that day. But I think one of the interesting things about garage sales to me is, and I hate having garage sales. I love to go to other people's and look through their junk, but having a garage sale, we haven't done it in a long time because it drives me bananas. And then at the end of the day, I have like $10 profit, and I'm like, that's 30 cents an hour. What is going on here? And so I don't like having a garage sale. But what I think's interesting is when you're going through that process, if you're thinking about, I put stuff on Marketplace or whatever, or in our neighborhood page, but if you're like thinking of the value of something you bought, so many times it's just all evaporated, isn't it? And if you set up a garage sale, whether it's in your garage or your yard or whatever, it kind of feels like you're going through a museum of what you used to think was valuable. It's like a museum of you, isn't it? I mean, you're walking around looking at this stuff, and, there's a chair or there's a lamp that at one time you thought was worth $50 or $75, and now it is worth a nickel, a quarter, right? If you expect anyone to walk away with it that day. And what do? I went to one garage sale, and I was in the market for old video game equipment. Ha, 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 right? Surprise. And so they had like this Genesis, which is an old 16-bit video game system that I never owned, but I've been on the hunt for a long time. And they wanted $300 for it. And I'm like, are you crazy? Like, what are you doing? And I was like, I'll give you $50. And they're like, get out of here. And so, I left. But that's weird, isn't it? We value things differently. And I think so interesting how a garage sale can really point to us, because sometimes you have like that old chair that you really love, that you really still find comfortable, and you think it's worth $50, and everyone's telling you it's worth $1, and you're like, well, I won't sell it then. I just won't sell it. I'll just put it back. I'll keep it. I'll just hang on to it. And that's kind of where we are with like our values. And I wanted to talk about values today because we tend to price non-tangible things in our life and tangible things in our life. And the non-tangibles, those things like your relationships, those things that you can't sell or at a garage sale make quick work of, your work, your time, your effort, your core values, who you are as a person. Those things are valuable in a different way. And sometimes those values, those things that you have in your life, since they're not on a spreadsheet or in a bank account, it makes it a little difficult for us to sometimes say what is valuable to us. But what I find interesting is that there actually is a way to quantify those things. And Jesus teaches a lesson in his next teaching in the Sermon on the Mount on this idea of what we find valuable and how we can figure out what's most valuable to us. Because sometimes we lie to ourselves, right? Just like that chair, that lamp we think is worth $50 and everyone's telling us it's worth $1. Sometimes the things that we say with our mouth are valuable, or if someone looked through our Instagram would say, oh, that's what they value most, is not the most valuable thing. So we're going to move right along in the Sermon on the Mount today. We just move, we keep moving further and further through the Sermon on the Mount. This is Matthew chapter 6, verse 19. And in this short little passage here, Jesus teaches about money and possessions, what we value in the tangible things. But it speaks to us about the intangible or the non-tangible things as well. Jesus teaches, don't store up treasures here on earth, where moths eat them and rust destroys them, and where thieves break in and steal. So already he's telling you, don't put higher value in the tangible things over the intangible. Verse 20 says, store your treasures in heaven, where moths and rust cannot destroy, and thieves do not break in and steal. Wherever your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will also be. Your eye is like a lamp that provides light for your body. And when your eye is healthy, your whole body is filled with light. But when your eye is unhealthy, your whole body is filled with darkness. And if the light you think you have is actually darkness, how deep that darkness is. No one can serve two masters, for you will hate one and love the other. You will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and be enslaved to money. I love the juxtapositions here that Jesus does for us. Moth, right? Rust, earth versus heaven. You see these things continually pitted against each other. And the language that he couches this argument in, or this contention, if you will, is this idea that often we think about things of physical things, at least tangible things, if we have to protect them, right? We obviously have to lock things up if we don't want them stolen. But he says, you know what? Those things are very low in value compared to the treasures you could store up in heaven. And so he says, put your value there. But possibly the most telling thing here that he says to me has always been this statement: wherever your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will also be. So instead of us focusing on the fact that sometimes values we can't really quantify, you actually can, Jesus teaches. You know what you value most, and it's a real simple thing. Just go look at what you're spending your money on. He says that says something. And you notice he doesn't say, the desires, go desire something with your heart, really, focus on it with your heart and say, I love this, I love this, I love this, and then your treasure will follow that. He says, no, wherever your treasure already is, that's the desires of your heart. That's what's happening. That's the connection here. There is a connection between what you value really, truly, and where you spend. Now, we live in a culture that constantly tells us to buy more, right? It is what a lot of businesses are developed around now. If we even think about the upgrade cycle for technology, whether you're talking computers or cell phones, it is so rapid. It is so, it didn't used to be that way, and now it's quicker and quicker and quicker. And I was talking to someone just the other day about this idea of how we used to, buy an appliance. If you remember grandma's house, I do at least, those appliances that were just gross and disgusting looking color-wise that she's still using because they're trucking along. Whereas today, if your dryer goes out, what do they tell you? They say, hey, I want to come fix this for you. No, they tell you, hey, probably that's going to cost more than a new one. TVs, we did that with a long time ago. I remember in my community, in the little community in Texas, there was a TV VCR repairman at my church, and he would go around and fix everyone's stuff. And I don't even know if those exist anymore because they're just like, just chuck it on big trash day and get you a new one because it's so much cheaper, because technology and the upgrade cycle has gone to that place. Well, Jesus flips that idea, that kind of throwaway, upgrade, more, more, more. And he says instead, that treasure's never going to last anyway. None of it's going to last. And so your heart is always going to follow your investment. They're tied together in that way. So if you keep investing in things that won't last, your joy, your happiness, your peace is all going to be very temporary. As long as you pursue things that won't fulfill you, you will never have that kind of happiness. John Wesley is one of the big theologians that created or at least kind of started this idea of Methodism. And so the United Methodist Church that exists in its form today traces its lineage back to Wesley. Of course, many other branches of Christianity came off of that. But I love some of his writings. And Wesley said this one time. He said, when I have money, I get rid of it quickly, lest it find a way into my heart. And I thought how interesting when you put that next to Jesus' teachings on the heart and treasure. This idea that we have to be careful and guard our hearts against what maybe treasure would lead us to. Now, it is interesting. Sometimes people will say, well, money is evil, right? And that's not what Jesus teaches here, actually, in the Sermon on the Mount. What did he teach, though? He taught that the love of money can take us into some really dark places, really quicker than we thought, and further than we ever thought possible. Because most of us look in the mirror in the morning, we like to think of ourselves as a pretty good person. We like to think of ourselves as like a pretty rational person, a logical person, a person that tries to do good in this world. But Jesus was trying to guard us because he knew the nature of the human heart, and he knew how quickly we could fall away. Wesley here reinforces this idea that he never wanted to amass wealth because he wasn't trusting of his heart. And this is someone that really dedicated himself to the faith, really dedicated himself to learning more about God and following Jesus. And so for all of us, I think it teaches us that we have to be careful about those things. Storage units, maybe you have one, maybe you've used one. I don't have one currently, but I have used one from time to time, certainly in moves to store stuff temporarily while they were building our house that we've been in now for several decades. Now I see the value in them, but I can't believe that it's one of the still fastest growing industries in our country. Storage units. They just keep building them. And they're rows and rows of little metal garages, and each one is packed often to the brim with stuff that people are paying to store that they don't want to get rid of, but they also don't really look at it for years, right? They store it away, out of sight, out of mind. So, there's these TV shows where they go around and they're buying units where people have stopped paying for them, or someone's deceased and they don't need it anymore. And they'll open it up, and what do you see? It's not gems, right? It's not gold. It's not Fort Knox. It's never stacks of cash. It's like broken down furniture, old like console TVs, like crazy stuff. Boxes labeled very important that have so much dust on them that you wonder, how could that be very important? And we spend thousands to store stuff we'll never use, protect things that no longer are prizes to us, and prolong those things that are in the, just like you said, moths and rust, and they're perishing. These things are in the process of perishing. And so earthly treasure doesn't just fade, but it also betrays us. It demands our loyalty. Because I remember Dave Ramsey talking about this one time. He's talked about this idea that the more stuff you have, the more of your attention it takes. Because if you have this, you have to manage this, and your mind has to be consumed with all the management tasks. And he's like, at what point do you own that stuff, or does that stuff own you? Because it can be very consuming. We think, this is what everyone needs to do. They need to own all these things. But the problem is those things can really drive us crazy. James, who's the half-brother of Jesus, said it this way. He said, "Look here, you rich people, weep and groan with anguish because of all the terrible troubles ahead of you. Your wealth is rotting away, and your fine clothes are moth-eaten rags." Yikes. "Your gold and silver are corroded." You see, James was just coming alongside this teaching of Jesus already and teaching once again, because you see the same language here, right? These moths are coming again. Rust and corrosion is coming again. Wealth itself rots. He said, look, and this is kind of a yikes moment, because we go, well, and we always love to read scripture like this and think it's someone else. Someone else is wealthy. But I got news for you. When you just live in this country, you're wealthier than like 95%, I think, is maybe 97% of the world. It's insane how the world distribution of wealth works. And so we are these wealthy people. We are the focal point here, because if we have any free time, if we have any time for entertainment, we have anything that goes beyond shelter and food, we have any resource beyond that, we are wealthy in this world. And Jesus teaches us this idea, and James connects this idea of these moths that come in to ruin stuff. And he says, even the finest stuff you own is not that valuable if a moth, a little bitty bug, can destroy it. if something that you can't even perceive happening, rust, can happen to that thing you value very highly, then it's not something that you will ever find lasting significance in. You will be disappointed because none of this stuff lasts. The Stoic Marcus Aurelius said it like this. He said, receive wealth or prosperity without arrogance and be ready to let it go. And that is a very Stoic thought process of always being ready to let go, whether it is a relationship, whether it is a thought, whether it is something you own, physical, but whatever you value, do not hold it, do not grip onto it so tightly. And certainly when wealth was talked about, Seneca had a lot of teachings on this, but Marcus Aurelius, to be teaching on this, he taught this idea of being willing to let it go, being willing to not hold on to that we have to receive everything welcomely, but also with open hands. And so how can we live out what Jesus has taught here? How can we live out what James reinforced? How can we live out this idea of being people that have a healthy perspective about and value about stuff? And so I want to talk about the generosity practice, because this is one of the spiritual practices in the New Testament that I think really prepares us to have a good attitude, a good perspective, and an outlook on what we've got. So this week I want to challenge you to practice not random generosity, but planned generosity and everyday kind of generosity. So I'm not talking about, you're writing the biggest check in the world. You're taking something huge off of. I'm saying something simple. An everyday kind of generosity. And think about ways you can do this throughout the week. Something that stretches you and causes you to trust God a little bit more, but also trains your heart away from this world and trains your heart to be more in line with the heart of Jesus. So, some instances of how we might do this, and these might be different for every single one of us, but you might donate some time. You might give some time this week. That's practicing presence over productivity. Practicing presence over being the most efficient, productive thing you can do in that moment. Sometimes when we give our time, it feels very inefficient. Have you ever volunteered somewhere and thought, wow, I am way more skilled than doing this job that they're asking me to do? And this feels terribly inefficient. And why am I spending time on this? And volunteering can feel that way. I'll absolutely agree with you. If you're serving someone food or a meal, or you're cleaning tables, or you're stacking chairs, it can feel very inefficient and very unproductive. But the reality is, in those moments, you're practicing your presence, you're practicing this moment of being with these people and spending time with these people, and it can retrain your heart, and it can refocus you. So maybe it's someone in your family, maybe it's someone in your neighborhood, maybe it's a coworker, but who could you give the gift of presence to this week? Maybe it is giving money. Maybe there's an opportunity for you to be generous with what you've been given. So maybe you can make an investment, but make sure it's something that you're not expecting to be paid back for, right? This is not a loan. This is not someone that you expect has that social contract with you where if I help you out now, you have to help me out later. None of that. I'm talking generosity needs to have no strings attached to it. It's just where you give and you expect no repayment. Or maybe it's that you're speaking words to someone. You're going to give some time to someone and speak encouragement. Encouragement costs us time. Sometimes it's uncomfortable, so it can cost us social comfort. But when we speak encouragement into someone's life, we can change them. We can change their week, their day, their month, maybe even the next year for them. We can give them new direction. And sometimes God's using us to be that voice of reason in their life where they are only seeing things negatively. They're only looking down on themselves. Maybe they're stuck in a moment of depression. We have a moment where we can speak encouragement and love in their life. Let's take that opportunity. So, planned generosity is the challenge this week. Because in my dream, in my vision, I wonder what it would be like if we, every week, when we got to Monday, we were thinking about how can I be generous this week? Not just one or two of us, but every single one of us. Those that have a lot and those that are, that are finding stress in their life with the financial stuff. Those that have a lot of free time and those that the calendar is just full. If all of us, though, thought strategically about how we could deploy generosity, my vision is, what would it look like then? What could our community look like? If we were looking always for what could we throw our influence behind? What could we throw our encouragement behind? What could we throw our finances behind? And what problems could we solve? What lives could we impact? if everyone's throwing in, all of a sudden it changes all of the calculations. It changes all of the outlook for our community. It changes all of the relationships. So what would it be like for us? We have people with the gift of generosity, right? We have certain people in our church that have that gift. There have been times, many times throughout the last 16 years, where we have been doing a project and there's no way we're going to get it done. And I'm looking at it and I'm looking at the deadline that I set. And I'm like, why did I set that deadline? That's a terrible deadline. I don't like that date. Let's move that date because we're just not even close. And we have people that have the gift of generosity that I don't beg, I don't ask. They just hear the need and they just come in and fill that. And so many times that has happened. So that's awesome, right? It's awesome that we know people that have the gift of generosity where it's just like, that is their spiritual gift. Some people have different spiritual gifts. This is theirs. But for all of us, we all need to, just like I say, exercise, right? It's a practice. It's just like any kind of weightlifting exercise or anything. We need to stretch ourselves. And so we all have the ability to be generous. We may not have the gift of generosity, but we all are called to practice this spiritual practice. And so let's look for ways in our context to make that happen this week. What if we calendared that? What if we didn't do random acts of kindness, but we planned our kindness? Because my experience with random acts of kindness is most of the time it's so random that we kind of just forget about it and we give up on it. I know it's that way with me if I'm like, I'm randomly going to think about exercise. I'm not going to the gym that week, right? I'm randomly going to read this book. It's going to be under the pile of books on my desk. I'm randomly going to respond to emails. 10,000 later in the inbox, right? Random isn't great. Planned is way better. Put it on the calendar. Put it on a note. Put it on a reminder to yourself. Pray about a moment of generosity this week. How could I shape my city, my state, my family, my heart to be more in line with the heart of Jesus? Because at the end of the day, I think what you fund is ultimately what you follow. Jesus didn't just teach generosity, right? He wasn't just a good teacher. He lived this with every fiber of his being. He gave even his own life. There is nothing more generous than that. He went to the cross for us. And so he modeled this, lived this. Every part of his being was generosity. And so when we give, we are not losing something. We are aligning ourselves with the heart of Jesus. We're trying to be more like him. Most of us, if we're honest, we know we're very far from Jesus. We are not even in the same classification or stratosphere many times. But our heart's desire is to be more like him, to see the world the way he did, to love one another the way that he did, to be sacrificial the way that he was. How do we do that? Small steps, practices. We get better with practice. We languish without it. And so to become more like Christ is to start down this path. What I fund is ultimately what I follow. And if I want to know what is important to me, what I really value, I don't have to set up a garage sale. If I want to know about the non-tangibles in my life, all I have to do is see, what am I giving to? What am I giving my time to? What am I giving my talent to? What am I giving my treasure to? And all of a sudden, I'll get a report card back for myself, at least, as to what I really value. And if I'm not happy with that, that's the point that I need to pray about it, and I need to make course adjustments.